Good afternoon. So you want to make French onion soup, the Triple H Ranch way. It's real easy to do. First, what I'm going to do is kind of go over the ingredients real quick. You're going to need about 3 pounds of onions. Make sure you use either yellow onions or sweet onions. Don't use a red onion. The texture and the color, it doesn't work. So you're going to need about 3 pounds of those onions, which is 7 or 8 medium-sized onions, chopped up. The next thing you're going to need is some beef broth, or you can use beef stock. Sometimes I'll use a container of beef broth and one of stock, but it doesn't really matter. These are 32 ounce each. You need 2 of those. You need about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, a tablespoon of kosher salt, and a teaspoon of black pepper, a tablespoon of thyme, dried thyme, and about a half a cup of wine, red wine. Doesn't have to be a great wine. It's going to be used mainly to deglaze. The other thing you would need is some sort of bread, because you're going to want to make some croutons. Now what I do is typically the day before, I'll cut some of the bread and leave it out on the counter to kind of dry, so that you have some croutons to put into the soup when you're done. And lastly, what you're going to need is a cheese to put on top when you bake your French onion. And I think the best cheese for that is Gruyere. Now you can use a combination, which is really good, of Gruyere and Swiss, or Gruyere and mozzarella. Either one does a fantastic job, but I think Gruyere just kind of takes it over the top. As far as what I use to cook in, of course you'll need a pot. Any standard pot will do. A 5-quart pot, 6-quart. I'll show you what I use is my little Dutch oven. And I'm getting it hot right now, and I'll put the oil in a minute. And then you'll need some crocks to put the soup in. Now the crocks I use are 12-ounce crocks, and this recipe makes enough to make 4 of those crocks, and you'll have a little bit of soup left over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the onions chopped up, and we'll get those into the pan in just a minute.
A few moments later.
Okay, so now we're over at the pot, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the couple of tablespoons of olive oil to the already kind of hot pot. I'm going to put in the onions that I sliced, and you can see that's the 3 pounds of onion. That's kind of about the size that I slice them. You can, of course, make them thinner, thicker. I think by slicing them a little thinner helps break them down a little bit. Now I'm going to add the salt and pepper. Okay. Seems like a lot, but... And then I'm going to add the thyme. Now, one thing I forgot to mention a minute ago is you also need some brown sugar. Now this helps. This is about 1.5 tablespoons. That helps the onions to caramelize. So what we're going to do is we're going to cook this on medium, which on my stove is either 5 or 6. We're going to cook this for about 20 to 30 minutes until the onions have caramelized. And it will take a little while, and you do have to kind of stick around and make sure that they're not getting too stuck on the bottom of your pan. So you're going to have to give them a stir every now and then. So we'll be back and we'll check on these in just a few minutes. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes, and as you can see, they've caramelized, and there's a little bit of brown on the pan. Don't be alarmed, that's actually desirable. So you want the onions, the key to this recipe is 2 things. time and time. The more time you allow these onions to simmer and caramelize, the better they are. They're more tender, they've accepted some of the seasoning, and they just give a great finished taste. And the other thing, of course, is time. By adding dried thyme to the dish, it just steps it up a whole new level. Now the next step is a little optional, but I add a couple pats of butter, melt that in. And this is just if you like your soup to be a little thicker. Not, you're not making it thick. It's a French onion soup. It's not a gravy, but it does just give it a little more body. So just a pat of butter, and then about a tablespoon of flour. And you stir that in until it's well absorbed. Okay. And now we're going to add our about a half a cup of wine, red wine, Cabernet to be specific, and just let that help deglaze. And you're just going to cook this for a couple minutes, again, just mainly to cook the alcohol out, and you'll see it'll thicken right back up again. Okay. The next step we're going to be doing here is adding in the broth. All right, so we're going to, and again, I'm adding in 2 32-ounce containers of broth. Now you could do 1.5 containers. That's fine as well. This I do both simply because my wife likes it to be a little soupier than, and less onions, I guess. So anyways, I add 2, but you could do 1.5 and it would be perfectly fine. Now what you're going to do is we're just going to put this down on low and let it simmer for a few hours. Now, if you have a crock pot, you could put it in a crock pot and set it on low, and it could sit there all day. As I said earlier, the key to this is time and time, right? The more time you can allow this to just cook on low, the better, ultimately, okay? But, you could bring this up to, you could heat this up a little bit, get it to a boil, let it cook a few minutes, put it in your crock, and and serve it. Put it in the oven and serve it. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, if you want it to be just incredibly rich, then cook it for a little while on the stove, on medium or on low, and let it cook. I would cover it and let it cook for a few hours, and then we'll be back when it's time to put it in the bowls and get it in the oven. Okay, so this soup's been on for several hours now, and it, as you can see, the onion is broke down nice, and now we're just gonna ladle it into our containers and then get it set up for the onion, or for the oven. Excuse me. Okay, so the next step is you're going to add your bread to each one. And then this is a mixture of about 80% Gruyere and 20% mozzarella. And you can use other mixtures, I assume. Okay, the oven's preheated to 350, and we're going to bake this for probably about a half hour to 45 minutes until the cheese starts to get a little caramelization. Alright, so we can pull the soup out of the oven. You can see it looks really good. Ugh. And bon appetit! French onion soup, Triple H Ranch style.